This is a story of a mother's love, a love so powerful it could build a perfect life for her only son. The woman's name was Veronica and the son's name was Josh. Veronica was a single mother who worked day and night, sacrificing everything to give Josh a life she could only dream of. To her, Josh was not just her son, he was her everything, the very reason she breathed. But he would repay her love with the cruelest betrayal imaginable, abandoning her in her darkest hour, leaving her to face death all alone. I promise you will not want to miss this powerful story of betrayal, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. So settle in and prepare to be deeply moved as we begin this unforgettable journey. And if you are new to our channel, welcome. Please hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications bell, and give this story a like if it touches your heart. Veronica believed her life was perfect. She had a small, lovely house, a garden full of beautiful flowers, and a son she loved more than life itself. She truly believed that this happiness would last forever. But she did not know that a great storm was coming to her peaceful life. A storm that would test a love she thought was unbreakable and change everything she ever knew. Veronica was a simple woman. She was 62 years old and her hair was the color of silver. Her face had many lines, but they were happy lines, lines from years of smiling and laughing. She had lived in the same small town her whole life. It was a quiet town where everyone knew each other, and the days passed slowly and peacefully. Her husband, a kind and hard-working man, had passed away many years ago, when their son, Josh, was just a little boy. It was a very sad time for Veronica. She was left all alone to raise her child. But Veronica was strong. She worked 2 jobs to make sure Josh had everything he needed. She worked as a cleaner in the morning and a waitress in the evening. Her hands were often rough and her back was often tired, but her heart was always full of love for her son. She never complained, not once. For her, every sacrifice was a gift to Josh. She wanted him to have a better life than she did. She wanted him to go to school, to get a good job, and to be a good man. And she did everything in her power to make that happen. Her little house was not big or fancy, but it was a home. It was filled with warmth and the smell of her cooking. The walls were covered with pictures of Josh. There were pictures of him as a baby, with a big, toothless smile. There were pictures of his first day of school, holding her hand tightly. There were pictures of his graduation, wearing a proud cap and gown. Every picture told a story of a mother's endless love and her son's journey into a man. Her greatest joy was her garden. It was a small patch of land behind her house, but to Veronica it was a paradise. She grew red tomatoes, green beans, and bright yellow sunflowers that stood tall and proud, just like she hoped her son would. Every morning she would go into her garden with a cup of tea. She would talk to her flowers, telling them her secrets and her dreams. The garden was her friend. It listened to her and it gave her peace. And then there was Josh, her son, her everything. Josh was now 28 years old. He was a handsome young man, tall and strong, with his father's kind eyes and Veronica's warm smile. To Veronica, he was the perfect son. He had finished college, just like she had always dreamed. He had a good job in the city, working in an office. He was smart and he was ambitious. Veronica was so proud of him. She would tell all her friends in the town, "My Josh, he is doing so well. He is such a good boy." Josh loved his mother very much, or so it seemed. He would call her every single day. Every morning on his way to work, he would call and say, "Good morning, Mom. How are you feeling today?" And every evening before he went to sleep, he would call and say, "Good night, Mom. I love you." These calls were the sunshine in Veronica's day. They made her feel loved and they made her feel important. Every weekend, Josh would drive from the city to visit her. The moment she heard his car pull into the driveway, her heart would fill with happiness. She would spend all of Saturday morning cooking his favorite meal, roasted chicken with potatoes from her garden. The whole house would fill with a delicious smell. She would set the table with her best plates, the ones she only used for special occasions. For Veronica, every time Josh came home, it was a special occasion. They would sit at the small kitchen table and talk for hours. Josh would tell her about his work, about his friends, and about his plans for the future. He talked about buying a bigger house one day and a fancy car. Veronica would listen carefully to every word. She did not understand much about his office job, but it did not matter. What mattered was that he was happy. What mattered was that he was sharing his life with her. She would look at him, her handsome son, and she would remember the little boy who used to hide behind her legs. She would remember how she taught him to ride a bicycle and how she held him when he fell and scraped his knee. She had given her entire life to this boy. He was her world, her moon, and all her stars. She believed their bond was the strongest thing in the world. She believed nothing could ever break it. "Mom," Josh would say, holding her hand, "one day I'm going to be very rich. I'm going to buy you a big, beautiful house. You won't have to work anymore. You can just relax in a big garden, bigger than this one." Veronica would smile, her heart swelling with love. "Oh, my dear son," she would say, her voice soft. "I don't need a big house. This little house is perfect because you are in it. All I need is you to be happy and healthy. That is my only wish." And she meant it. She did not care for money or for fancy things. All of her happiness was tied to her son. His success was her success. His happiness was her happiness. She could not imagine a life without him. But slowly, very slowly, things began to change. It was a small change, so small that at first Veronica did not even notice it. Or perhaps she did not want to notice it. Josh started talking a lot about a girl from his work. Her name was Tiffany. Veronica was happy for him. She wanted him to find a nice girl and settle down. But when Josh talked about Tiffany, his eyes had a different kind of light in them. He talked about her expensive clothes, her fancy car, and her wealthy family. He seemed very impressed by her money. One weekend, he brought Tiffany home to meet Veronica. Tiffany was beautiful, with long blonde hair and clothes that looked like they cost more than Veronica earned in a month. She smiled at Veronica, but her smile did not reach her eyes. She looked around the small house with a strange look on her face. She did not like it. Veronica could feel it. Tiffany did not eat much of the roasted chicken that Veronica had spent all morning preparing. She said she was on a special diet. She spent most of the visit looking at her phone, tapping on the screen with her long, painted nails. She did not talk to Veronica very much. When they left, Veronica felt a small sadness in her heart. She did not say anything to Josh. She did not want to upset him. But she knew that this girl was not right for her son. This girl did not have a kind heart. After that visit, Josh's weekend visits became a little shorter. His phone calls became a little quicker. He would still call every day, but the conversations were not as long. He was always busy. "I have to go, Mom. Tiffany is waiting," he would often say. Veronica started to feel a little lonely. The house felt bigger and quieter when he was not there. But she told herself that this was normal. Her son was growing up. He had his own life now. A mother's job is to love her children and then let them go. She tried to be happy for him. She really did. Around the same time, Veronica started to feel very tired. It was not the usual tiredness from working in her garden. It was a deep tiredness. A tiredness that settled in her bones and did not go away, even after a long night's sleep. She also developed a cough. It was a small, dry cough at first. She thought it was just a cold. She drank warm tea with honey and lemon, but the cough would not go away. It stayed with her, a constant, annoying tickle in her throat. She did not tell Josh about it. He was so busy with his new life, his new job, his new girlfriend. She did not want to be a burden. She did not want him to worry about his old mother. She had always taken care of him. She had always been the strong one, and she would continue to be the strong one. One Sunday, after Josh had left, she was washing the dishes. Suddenly, a wave of dizziness washed over her. The room started to spin. She grabbed the edge of the sink to steady herself. Her heart was beating very fast. The feeling passed after a minute, but it left her feeling weak and scared. For the first time, a real fear entered Veronica's heart. She knew something was wrong. This was more than just being tired. This was more than a simple cold. But she pushed the fear away. She told herself she was just getting old. Old people get tired. Old people get dizzy sometimes. It was nothing. It was nothing to worry about. She looked at the picture of Josh on her wall, the one from his graduation. He was smiling so brightly, holding his certificate, looking like he could conquer the world. Her heart filled with that familiar warm love. He was her whole world. He was her reason for living. And she would do anything to protect him and to protect their happy life, a life she had worked so hard to build. She would not let a small cough or a little dizziness ruin it. She would be fine. She had to be fine for him. The days after that dizzy spell turned into weeks, and Veronica's strength began to leave her, like sand slipping through her fingers. The tiredness was no longer just in her bones. It was in her mind, in her spirit. Waking up in the morning felt like climbing a steep mountain. Even simple things, like walking to her beloved garden, became a difficult task. The flowers she loved so much started to look a little sad, their heads drooping, as if they could feel her weakness. Her cough became a constant companion, a rough, barking sound that echoed in the quiet house. She started losing weight. Her clothes, which had always fit her perfectly, now hung loosely on her small frame. She tried to hide it. When Josh called, she would take a deep breath and make her voice sound bright and happy. "I'm wonderful, my dear," she would lie, forcing a cheerfulness she did not feel. "Just spend the morning in the garden. The tomatoes are looking so red and lovely." She did not want him to worry. His life in the city was so important, so full of promise. She could not, would not, be a dark cloud in his sunny sky. She was his mother. Her job was to protect him, even from her own pain. But you cannot hide a shadow forever. One afternoon, her neighbor, a kind woman named Margaret, came over with a small cake. Margaret had been Veronica's friend for over 30 years. They had watched their children grow up together. Margaret took one look at Veronica and her friendly smile faded. "Veronica, dear," she said, her voice full of concern. "You don't look well. You're as pale as a ghost. And you're so thin. Are you eating properly?" Veronica tried to wave it away. "Oh, it's nothing, Margaret. Just a little cold I can't seem to shake. I'm just getting old, that's all." But Margaret was not convinced. She put the cake down on the table and took Veronica's hand. It felt frail and cool in her own warm, strong grip. "This is more than a cold, and you know it," she said gently, but firmly. "You have been coughing for months. You need to see a doctor, Veronica. You cannot take care of everyone else and forget to take care of yourself. Promise me you'll make an appointment." Looking into her friend's worried eyes, Veronica couldn't pretend anymore. The wall she had built around her fear began to crumble. She nodded slowly, a tear escaping from the corner of her eye and rolling down her wrinkled cheek. "Okay, Margaret," she whispered. "I promise." The next day, with trembling hands, Veronica called the doctor's office. The appointment felt like a lifetime away. The days leading up to it were filled with a quiet dread. She would sit in her chair by the window, watching the world go by, and a terrible fear would grip her heart. What was wrong with her? What if it was something serious? And then her thoughts would always go back to Josh, her son, her reason for living. She had to be strong for him. The doctor's office was cold and smelled of cleaning supplies. The doctor was a kind man with gentle eyes, but his face was very serious as he listened to her. He asked her many questions. He listened to her chest with a cold stethoscope. Then he said the words she was dreading. "We need to run some tests, Veronica. Some scans and some blood work. We need to see what's going on inside." The next few weeks were a blur of hospital visits. She had to take a bus to the hospital in the next town over. She went alone. She did not tell Josh. She told him she was busy helping Margaret with a church event. The lies felt heavy on her tongue, but she believed they were necessary. The tests were uncomfortable and tiring. She felt like a small, fragile boat being tossed around in a big, cold ocean. All she could do was hold on and pray. Then came the waiting. The waiting was the worst part. Every time the phone rang, her heart would jump into her throat. Every day that passed without a call made the fear grow bigger and darker in her mind. She tried to keep busy. She tended to her garden, her movements slow and careful. She baked cookies she didn't have the appetite to eat. But the fear was always there, a cold knot in the pit of her stomach. The call came on a Tuesday morning. It was the doctor's office. The nurse's voice was polite, but it held no warmth. The doctor would like to see you to discuss your test results. Can you come in tomorrow afternoon? Veronica's world stopped. She knew. In that moment, she knew it was not good news. Good news is given quickly over the phone. Bad news requires a chair to sit on. She sat in the doctor's office, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. The doctor came in and sat down across from her. He looked at her with kind, sad eyes. He took a deep breath. And then he said the word. The one word she had been so afraid of. Veronica, he said softly. The tests show that you have cancer. The word hung in the air, heavy and ugly. Cancer. It felt like a death sentence. The doctor kept talking, using words like lungs and treatment and chemotherapy. But Veronica couldn't hear him. All she could hear was a loud ringing in her ears. Her vision blurred. The room felt like it was closing in on her. She felt like she was drowning. Her first clear thought, when the fog in her mind finally lifted a little, was not about herself. It was not, am I going to die? It was, what will happen to Josh? The thought of telling her son, of placing this terrible burden on his strong young shoulders, was more painful than the diagnosis itself. It felt like a betrayal of her duty as a mother. She went home in a daze. She made a cup of tea, but her hands were shaking so much that she spilled most of it. She sat at her kitchen table, staring at the wall of pictures of Josh. His smiling face looked down at her. How could she tell him? How could she ruin his perfect life? For 2 days, she kept the terrible secret locked inside her heart. It was a heavy, burning secret. She felt completely alone. But she knew she couldn't keep it from him forever. He was her son. He had a right to know. He would want to know. He loved her. He would be there for her. He would hold her hand and tell her everything would be okay. He was a good boy. She held on to that thought like a lifeline. With that hope in her heart, she finally picked up the phone. She dialed his number, her finger trembling. He answered on the 3rd ring. "Hi, Mom." His voice was cheerful. "How are you?" Veronica took a shaky breath. "Josh, my dear," she began, her voice barely a whisper. I need to tell you something." The cheerfulness in his voice vanished, replaced by concern. "Mom, what is it? You sound strange." "I went to the doctor, Josh," she said, the tears starting to fall. "The tests came back. Oh, Josh, they found cancer." There was a silence on the other end of the line. A long, heavy silence. Then his voice, full of shock. "What? Cancer? Mom, are you sure?" "No, that can't be right." "It's right, my love," she sobbed. "I'm so sorry." "Don't be sorry, Mom," he said quickly, and for a moment he sounded like her little boy again. "I'm coming home. I'll leave right now. We'll figure this out. I'll be there in a few hours. Just stay calm. I'm on my way." She hung up the phone, and a wave of relief washed over her. He was coming. He was coming to be with her. He still loved her. Everything was going to be all right. She had her son. She waited for him, a small flame of hope flickering in the darkness of her fear. A few hours later, she heard his car pull into the driveway. Her heart leaped with joy. She hurried to the door and opened it. But Josh was not alone. Tiffany was with him. They walked into the house. Josh's face was pale and worried. Tiffany's face was blank. She looked around the small, simple living room as if it smelled bad. Josh hugged his mother, but the hug felt stiff. It was not the warm, strong hug she was used to. "Mom," he said, his voice strained. "We need to talk about this." They sat down at the kitchen table. Tiffany sat next to Josh, placing her hand on his arm. She did not say a word to Veronica. She just looked at Josh. "The doctor said I need to start treatment right away," Veronica explained, her voice trembling. "It's called chemotherapy." Josh looked at Tiffany. Tiffany leaned over and whispered something in his ear. Veronica couldn't hear what she said, but she saw the look on Josh's face change. The worry was replaced by something else. Something cold. "Mom," Josh said, not looking her in the eye. "We looked it up on the way here. This kind of treatment, it's very expensive, and it takes a long time. You'll be very sick. You won't be able to work." Veronica's heart started to beat faster. "I know, my dear, but what choice do I have?" Josh looked at Tiffany again. She gave a small, almost invisible shake of her head. "The thing is, Mom," Josh continued, his voice getting colder with every word, "Tiffany and we have plans. We were saving up for a house. My job is very demanding. I can't just take time off to take care of you." The words hit Veronica like physical blows. She could not believe what she was hearing. This was not her son. This was a stranger. "But, Josh," she stammered, "I'm your mother." "I know that," he said, finally looking at her. But his eyes were not the kind eyes of the boy she had raised. They were hard and distant. "But this is a huge burden. I have my own life to live. I can't put everything on hold because of this." Tiffany finally spoke. Her voice was sharp and clear. "What Josh is trying to say, Veronica, is that we can't afford this. Not just the money, but the time. It would ruin everything we've been working for." Tears were now streaming down Veronica's face. The small flame of hope inside her was extinguished, plunged into icy water. "So, what are you saying?" she whispered, her voice breaking. Josh stood up. He walked over to the counter, took out his wallet, and pulled out a few $100 bills. He placed them on the table in front of her. "Here," he said. "This should help for a little while. The hospital has people who can help you. There are programs for this kind of thing. They'll take care of you." He wouldn't look at her. He couldn't. "You're leaving?" she asked, her voice hollow with disbelief. "You're leaving me?" "We have to go, Mom," he said, walking towards the door. Tiffany was already there, her hand on the doorknob. It's for the best. I'll call you." He didn't even say goodbye. He just walked out the door, following Tiffany. Veronica sat frozen at her kitchen table, listening to the sound of his car starting. She heard the crunch of the tires on the gravel driveway, and then the sound faded into the distance, leaving only a devastating silence. She looked at the money on the table. It felt like the cruelest insult. Her son, her everything, the boy she had sacrificed her entire life for, had just left her to die. He had sold her life for his plans, for his future. For a girl with a cold heart, she was all alone. In the quiet, empty house, with a terrible sickness inside her and a pain in her heart far worse than any cancer, Veronica was completely and utterly alone. The silence that followed the sound of Josh's car was the loudest thing Veronica had ever heard. It was a heavy, suffocating silence that filled every corner of her small home. It pressed down on her, pushing the air from her lungs. She sat there at the kitchen table, her teacup cold, her hands still trembling in her lap. She stared at the $300 bills her son had left behind. They looked dirty, like a stain on her clean, worn-out tablecloth. This money was not a gift. It was a payment. A payment to end a relationship. A payment to close the book on a mother's love. She sat there for a long time. The sun went down and the kitchen grew dark, but she did not turn on the lights. The darkness outside matched the darkness that had flooded her heart. The pictures on the wall, the happy, smiling faces of her son, now looked like ghosts from another life, a life that was over. The love she thought was the strongest thing in the world, the love she had built her entire life around, had been broken in a single moment. It had shattered into a million tiny pieces, and she did not know how to put them back together again. She did not sleep that night. She just sat in her chair listening to the silence. Every creak of the old house sounded like a footstep, and for a foolish second her heart would leap with hope. Maybe he had come back. Maybe he had realized his mistake. But the sound would fade, and she would be alone again, truly alone. The next day was the same, and the day after that. She did not eat, she did not drink. The food in the refrigerator spoiled. The flowers in the garden began to wilt, their bright heads drooping in the sun, thirsty for the water she no longer had the strength to give them. Her world had shrunk to the four walls of her silent house. The cancer inside her body was a quiet fire, but the pain in her heart was a raging storm. She kept her phone by her side, always. She looked at it 100 times a day. He had said, "I'll call you." She believed him, or she wanted to believe him. Every time a car drove past her house, she would run to the window, her heart pounding. But it was never him. He did not call. Not that day. Not the next day. A week went by. Then, too, the phone remained silent. The hope inside her, which had been a small flame, then a tiny flicker, finally turned to cold ash. He was not coming back. He was not going to call. He was gone. One morning, she woke up on the floor. She must have fainted from weakness. She lay there, looking up at the ceiling, and she thought, "This is it. This is how it ends. Alone on the floor of my empty house. She felt a strange sense of peace in that moment. It would be easy to just close her eyes. It would be easy to just let go. The fight seemed too hard. The pain seemed too big. But then, something happened. As she lay there, she saw a picture on the wall. It was not a picture of Josh. It was an old, faded picture of her husband, the one she had loved so dearly. He was standing in their garden, holding a big sunflower, smiling his kind, gentle smile. And in that moment, she remembered him. She remembered his strength. She remembered his love. She remembered how he had always told her, "Veronica, you are the strongest woman I know. You can get through anything." She had promised him, on the day he died, that she would be strong, that she would raise their son to be a good man, that she would live a good life. Lying on the floor, ready to give up, she felt like she was breaking that promise. A new feeling started to grow inside her, very small at first. It was not hope. It was something tougher. It was determination. She would not let her son's cruelty be the end of her story. She would not let this disease win. She would fight. Not for Josh. Not anymore. She would fight for herself. She would fight for the memory of her husband. She would fight for the life she still had left. With a great effort, she pushed herself up from the floor. Her legs were shaky, like a newborn deer. She walked to the kitchen and drank a glass of water. It was the first thing she had tasted in days. Then she walked to the table, picked up the $300 bills and put them in an envelope. She would not use his money. She would do this on her own. Her friend Margaret saved her. She came by a few days later, worried that Veronica had not been answering her phone. When she saw Veronica, so thin and frail, she gasped. Veronica did not lie this time. She sat Margaret down and told her everything. She told her about the cancer. She told her what Josh had done. She cried, and Margaret held her, letting her pour out all the pain and betrayal. Margaret was a good friend. She did not judge. She did not pity. She got angry. "That boy," she said, her voice shaking with rage. "After everything you did for him, how could he?" But then her anger softened into love. "You are not alone, Veronica," she said, holding her hands tightly. "You hear me? You have me. We will get through this together." And they did. Margaret came over every single day. She brought groceries. She cooked warm, nourishing soups. She forced Veronica to eat, even when she didn't want to. She took her to her first chemotherapy appointment. The hospital became Veronica's new world. It was a world of white walls, beeping machines, and the strange, sharp smell of disinfectant. It was a scary place. But Veronica was no longer scared. She was a warrior. She faced the treatment with a quiet courage that surprised even herself. The chemotherapy was a poison that was meant to heal her. It made her terribly sick. Her body ached, and she felt a weakness she had never imagined. But every time she felt like giving up, she would think of her husband's smile, and she would find the strength to go on. The hardest day was the day her hair started to fall out. She was brushing it in the morning, and it came out in big clumps in her hand, her beautiful silver hair all gone. She looked in the mirror and saw a stranger staring back at her, a pale, sick, bald woman. She cried not because she had lost her hair, but because she had lost a part of herself. Margaret came over that afternoon with a bag. Inside were several beautiful soft scarves. She sat with Veronica and showed her how to tie them. "There," Margaret said, tying a lovely blue scarf around Veronica's head. "You look beautiful. You look like a queen." In the mirror, Veronica saw a glimmer of the old her. She was still in there. Slowly, very slowly, things began to change. The treatment was hard, but it was working. The doctors were happy. They said she was responding well. She started to feel a little bit stronger. She started to eat a little bit more. One sunny afternoon, she felt strong enough to go into her garden. It was a mess. The weeds were everywhere, and her beautiful flowers were all dead. It looked as sad and broken as she had felt. She almost turned back, but then she saw it. In a corner of the garden, a single small sunflower was growing. It must have grown from a seed that had fallen last year. It was small and weak, but it was alive. It was fighting to reach the Sunday. Looking at that little sunflower, Veronica felt a connection. It was just like her. Small, weak, but fighting. She got down on her knees, her joints aching, and she started to pull the weeds from around the little plant. It was hard work. After only a few minutes, she was tired and out of breath. But she didn't stop. She cleared a small patch of earth around the sunflower. She went inside, got some water, and gave the little plant a drink. From that day on, taking care of the sunflower became her reason to get out of bed in the morning. Every day, she would go out and tend to it. She would talk to it just like she used to talk to all her flowers. "We're going to make it, you and me," she would whisper. "We're going to be strong." And as the weeks turned into months, the little sunflower grew. Its stem got thicker and its leaves got bigger. And Veronica grew with it. The color returned to her cheeks. The strength returned to her body. She finished her chemotherapy. She started to take walks with Margaret. She started to bake again. Her house, which had been so silent and sad, was now filled with the smell of cookies and the sound of her and Margaret laughing. The pain of her son's betrayal was still there. It was a scar on her heart that would never fully heal, but it no longer controlled her. She had found a new life, a quiet, simple life built on friendship and her own incredible strength. She had faced the darkest storm of her life, and she had survived. She was still standing. Like the sunflower in her garden, which was now tall and strong, its face turned proudly towards the Sunday. 5 years is a long time. It is long enough for a wound to heal, leaving only a pale, thin scar. It is long enough for a garden left to die to bloom again, more beautiful than ever before. For Veronica, 5 years was a lifetime. She had walked through the darkest valley of her life and had come out on the other side into the sunshine. The cancer was gone. The doctors used the word remission, a word that sounded like a beautiful promise. Her hair had grown back, not as long as it once was, but it was a lovely thick crown of pure silver. The lines on her face were deeper now, but they were not lines of sadness. They were lines of strength. She had found a new kind of peace, a quiet happiness that did not depend on anyone else. Her little house was still her home, but it was no longer a place of sad memories. It was her sanctuary. Her friendship with Margaret had grown even stronger. They were like sisters, sharing cups of tea, stories, and laughter. Veronica had also found a new purpose. Twice a week, she volunteered at the community church, helping to run a soup kitchen for people who had fallen on hard times. She had learned what it felt like to be truly alone, and she never wanted anyone else to feel that way. Serving soup, ladling it into bowls for the hungry and the homeless, gave her a special kind of joy. She would look into the faces of the people who came, and she would not see strangers. She would see someone's son, someone's daughter, someone's mother or father. She treated every single person with kindness and respect. She would give them a warm smile and say, "God bless you." And she meant it with all her heart. She rarely thought of Josh anymore. The sharp, tearing pain of his betrayal had faded over the years into a dull, quiet ache. It was a sadness she carried deep inside her, a small, heavy stone in her heart. She had forgiven him, not because he deserved it, but because she deserved peace. Holding on to anger was like drinking poison and expecting the other person to die. She had let it go. She prayed for him sometimes, late at night. She prayed that he was happy. She prayed that he had found the life he wanted. She had no idea where he was or what had happened to him. After that final, terrible day, he had simply disappeared from her life. There had been no calls, no letters, no word at all. He was gone. One cold Tuesday afternoon in November, Veronica was at her usual post behind the long serving table at the soup kitchen. The hall was full. The wind was blowing hard outside, and many people had come in to find warmth and a hot meal. Veronica was serving a thick, hearty beef stew that she had helped prepare that morning. The smell filled the room. She was focused on her work, smiling at each person, filling their bowls. When she saw him, he was at the very back of the long line, huddled in a corner, as if trying to make himself invisible. He was wearing a thin, torn jacket that was no match for the November cold. His head was down, his face hidden by a dirty, ripped baseball cap. There was something about the way he stood, the way he held his thin shoulders, that made Veronica's heart give a strange little jump. It was a familiar shape, a ghost from a past she had buried long ago. No, she told herself, it can't be. It was just a trick of the light, a memory playing with her mind. Josh was in the city. He was a successful man now. He was probably living in a big house with Tiffany, driving a fancy car. He would never be in a place like this. She shook the thought from her head and turned her attention back to the man in front of her. But her eyes kept going back to the figure in the corner. As the line moved forward, he got closer and closer. He was limping badly, favoring one leg. He was so thin, thinner than anyone she had ever seen. His hands, which clutched a dirty napkin, were trembling. She could see them shaking even from across the room. A cold feeling of dread began to creep into Veronica's heart. a feeling she had not felt for a very long time. He was only a few people away now. He kept his head down, his eyes fixed on the floor. Veronica's heart was pounding in her chest. It felt like a drum beating against her ribs. "Please," she prayed silently, "please don't let it be him." Then it was his turn. He shuffled forward and held out his bowl. He did not look up. He did not speak. His hands were covered in sores and his fingernails were black with dirt. Veronica stared at those hands. She would know them anywhere. They were the hands she had held when he was a baby. The hands she had bandaged when he fell from his bicycle. The hands that had held hers and promised to take care of her forever. Her own hand, holding the ladle, began to shake. The hot stew sloshed over the side of the bowl. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice a dry crackle. At the sound of her voice, the man flinched. He looked up just for a second. His eyes, full of fear and shame, met hers. The world stopped. The noise of the busy hall, the clatter of spoons, the murmur of conversations, it all faded into a deafening silence. It was him. It was Josh. But it was not the Josh she remembered. The handsome, proud young man was gone. In his place was a broken stranger. His face was like a skull. His skin stretched tight over his bones. His eyes, his father's kind eyes, were sunken and hollow, filled with a pain so deep it made Veronica's soul ache. He was sick. He was dying. For a moment, neither of them moved. They just stared at each other across a vast ocean of time and pain. Then, a look of pure terror filled Josh's eyes. He dropped the bowl. It clattered on the floor, spilling brown stew everywhere. He turned and tried to run. He stumbled, his bad leg giving way, and then he was gone, pushing his way through the crowd and out the door into the cold. Veronica was frozen. 100 feelings crashed over her at once. Anger, shock, grief. The memory of him walking out of her house 5 years ago was as clear as if it had just happened. He had left her. He had left her to die. A voice in her head, a cold, hard voice, whispered, "Let him go. He made his choice. This is what he deserves." But then another voice, a much older and stronger voice, spoke louder. It was the voice of a mother. It was the voice of unconditional love. It did not see the broken man who had just run away. It saw a little boy crying in the dark, afraid of the monsters under his bed. It saw her son, her child, her everything. And he was in pain. He was suffering. And he was alone. The mother love in her, a love that she thought had turned to ash, rose up like a powerful wave. It washed away all the anger, all the pain, all the years of hurt. In that moment, there was only one thing that mattered. She could not let him die. She could not let him suffer alone in the cold. She put the ladle down on the table. Margaret, who had seen the whole thing, rushed to her side, her face full of shock and concern. "Veronica? Was that?" "It's him," Veronica said, her voice shaking but full of a new, fierce strength. "It's my Josh." She didn't wait for a reply. She untied her apron and ran. She ran out of the church hall into the biting November wind. She did not know where he had gone, but she had to find him. She looked down the street to the left. Nothing. She looked to the right. And there he was, a few blocks away, huddled on a bench in a small empty park. He had his head in his hands, and his thin shoulders were shaking with sobs. Veronica's heart broke. She walked towards him, her steps slow and quiet, so as not to scare him away. He was so fragile. He looked like a gust of wind might blow him away. She stood in front of him for a moment. He did not look up. "Josh," she said softly. Her voice was gentle, like a prayer. He flinched, as if he had been struck. He looked up, his face wet with tears, full of a shame so deep it was painful to see. "Go away," he croaked, his voice rough and broken from sickness and disuse. "Please, just go away. You shouldn't see me like this. Just leave me alone to die." Veronica's own tears began to fall, hot on her cold cheeks. She did not go away. She sat down on the cold bench beside him. She did not scold him. She did not ask him what had happened. She did not mention the past. She did not say, "I told you so." She just did what a mother does. She reached out and put her hand on his thin, trembling arm. Through the torn fabric of his jacket, she could feel how little there was of him. He was just skin and bone. He tried to pull away, but she held on gently. "You are sick," she said, her voice soft but firm, full of a love that had survived everything. "And you are cold, and you are my son." She looked into his broken eyes and spoke the words that his heart had been starving to hear. "Come home, Josh. Please. Let me take care of you. Let me help you. Just come home." Bringing Josh home was like carrying a fragile, wounded bird. He was so weak, he could barely walk. Veronica put her arm around his thin shoulders and helped him step by slow, painful step back to her car. He did not speak. He just kept his head down, his face hidden in shame, his body trembling with a mixture of cold, sickness, and raw emotion. The drive back to the little house was silent. The only sound was the quiet hum of the engine and the ragged sound of Josh's breathing. For Veronica, it felt like a dream. She kept looking over at the broken man in the passenger seat, trying to see the sun she remembered in the hollows of his face. The past 5 years had been cruel to him. He was a ghost of the person he once was. When they arrived at the house, he hesitated at the door, as if he did not have the right to enter. Veronica gently took his hand. "Come inside, my love," she said, her voice full of a warmth he had not felt in years. "You are home now." The first thing she did was wrung him a hot bath. While the tub filled, she found some of her late husband's old clothes, a soft flannel shirt and some comfortable sweatpants. They would be too big for him now, but they were clean and warm. When she went to the bathroom to give them to him, she saw the full extent of his suffering. When he took off his torn, filthy jacket, she saw the needle marks on his thin arms. The terrible truth of his life on the streets hit her with the force of a physical blow. He had been doing drugs. Her son, her brilliant, ambitious boy, had fallen into a darkness she could never have imagined. A wave of grief washed over her. but she pushed it down. Now was not the time for tears. Now was the time for love. She helped him into the bath, her movements gentle and sure. She washed his matted hair and his dirty skin as if he were a little child again. He did not resist. He simply closed his eyes and let his mother take care of him, tears leaking from under his closed eyelids and mixing with the bath water. After his bath, she helped him into the warm clothes and led him to the small guest bedroom. It was the same room he had used on his weekend visits all those years ago. She had kept it just the way he liked it. He collapsed onto the bed, and before his head even hit the pillow, he was fast asleep, his body finally surrendering to an exhaustion that was years in the making. Veronica watched him sleep for a long time. She saw the pain etched on his face, even in his dreams. She covered him with a thick, warm blanket, tucking it in around him, just like she did when he was a little boy afraid of the dark. Her heart was a battlefield of emotions. There was a deep, aching sadness for the years he had lost, for the suffering he had endured. There was a flicker of anger at the choices he had made. But overpowering everything was a love so deep and so powerful, it was like the ocean. It was a mother's love, a love that does not ask questions, a love that does not keep score. It just is. The next few weeks were a slow, difficult journey back to life. Josh was very sick. The drugs had destroyed his body. He slept most of the time, and when he was awake, he was weak and in pain. Veronica became his nurse, his cook, his protector. She made him nourishing broths and soups, spoon-feeding him when he was too weak to lift his head. She called her doctor, the same kind man who had treated her, and he helped her find a program that could help Josh get clean. She sat by his bed for hours, sometimes reading to him, sometimes just holding his hand in silence. Slowly, like a flower turning towards the sun, Josh began to heal. The color started to return to his face. He started to eat a little more. He started to stay awake for longer periods. And as his body healed, his mind began to wake up too. And with that came the memories, the crushing weight of what he had done. One afternoon, he was sitting up in bed, and Veronica brought him a bowl of her chicken soup. He looked at her, his eyes clear for the first time in a very long time, and he began to cry. Not the quiet, ashamed tears from before, but deep, racking sobs that shook his entire body. "Mom," he choked out between sobs, "I'm so sorry. I am so sorry." Veronica sat on the edge of the bed and pulled him into her arms. She held her son, her grown man who was crying like a lost child, and she cried with him. "She left me," he sobbed into her shoulder. "Tiffany." "After a few months," she said. She said she didn't want a boyfriend whose mother had cancer. It was too depressing. "She left me. I lost my job. I lost the apartment. I had nothing. I was so ashamed. I couldn't come back to you. I couldn't face you. I was a coward." He told her everything. The story tumbled out of him, a terrible, sad story of bad choices, loneliness, and despair. How one bad decision had led to another, pulling him down into a spiral of drugs and homelessness until he had lost everything, including himself. I left you to die, he cried, his voice filled with self-hatred. I left you when you needed me the most. How can you even look at me? How can you touch me? I don't deserve this. I don't deserve you. Veronica held him tighter. She stroked his hair, which was starting to grow back, soft and clean. Hush now, my love, she whispered, her voice thick with her own tears. It's in the past. We all make mistakes, Josh. Every single one of us. The important thing is to learn from them. The important thing is that you are home now. You are safe, and I love you. I have always loved you, and I will always love you. Nothing you could ever do would change that. His sobs slowly quieted. He looked up at her, his face a mess of tears and disbelief. But how? How can you forgive me? Forgiveness is a gift you give yourself, Josh, she said softly, wiping his tears with her thumb. And I chose to forgive a long time ago. Now, you need to learn to forgive yourself. In the months that followed, Josh continued to heal, not just his body, but his soul. He worked hard to stay clean. He started helping Veronica around the house and in her garden, working in the soil, feeling the sun on his face, seemed to bring him peace. The quiet, simple life his mother lived, a life he had once looked down on, now seemed like the most precious thing in the world. He saw her strength, her quiet grace, her endless capacity for love, and he was filled with a sense of awe. One day, after he was fully recovered, Veronica sat him down at the kitchen table. She took out an old shoebox from her closet. Inside was a bank book. She opened it and showed it to him. "This is my savings, Josh," she said. "It's the money your father and I saved. It's not much, but there's $50,000 here. I want you to have it. I want you to use it to start over, to build a new life for yourself." Josh stared at the bank book, his eyes wide with shock. He shook his head violently. "No, Mom, no. I can't take this. I could never accept it. Not after what I did. I don't deserve it." He was broken, remembering the few $100s he had thrown on the table as he abandoned her. But Veronica was firm. She pushed the book into his hands. "You are my son," she said, her voice full of a love that could move mountains. "You are the only family I have left. This family's name, this family's future, continues with you. This is not a gift you have to earn. It is a gift of love. It is a gift to help you stand on your own 2 feet again. Please, my son, take it for me." He cried, but this time they were tears of gratitude. He did not accept the money to leave. He accepted it as a tool to rebuild, a symbol of his mother's incredible grace. He did not move out of the house. The thought of leaving his mother again was unbearable. He knew he could never repay her, but he was going to spend the rest of his life trying. He stayed. He took care of her, cooking for her, cleaning the house, tending the garden, and simply sitting with her, talking for hours, making up for all the lost years. With the money, he started a small business. He bought a used van and started a local delivery service. He called it Second Chance Logistics. He worked harder than he had ever worked in his life, driven by a deep desire to make his mother proud. His honesty and his hard work paid off. The business grew. After 1 year, he had another van. After 3 years, he had a small fleet and several employees. After 5 years, Josh was a successful businessman. He was not rich in the way Tiffany would have wanted. He did not have a fancy car or a big empty house, but he was rich in a way that truly mattered. He had bought his mother's little house from her, giving her the money so she would never have to worry again. They lived there together. He had added a beautiful sunroom onto the back, where she could sit and look out at her garden, which was now bigger and more beautiful than ever. Every evening they would eat dinner together at the small kitchen table. He would tell her about his day, and she would listen, her heart full to bursting with pride and love. He had not just rebuilt his life, he had rebuilt their life together. He had found his way home, not just to a house, but to the unconditional love that had been waiting for him all along. He had been given a second chance, and he had used it to become the good man his mother had always known he could be. Dear viewers, this story is a powerful reminder that a mother's love is one of the most resilient forces on earth. It teaches us that true forgiveness is not about forgetting the pain, but about choosing to love despite it. Josh had to lose everything he thought was important to finally understand that the greatest treasure he ever had was the unconditional love of his mother, a love he had thrown away so easily. Now we ask you, do you believe Veronica did the right thing by forgiving her son and giving him everything to start over? Or should he have been made to face the consequences of his cruel actions on his own mother? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If this story of forgiveness and redemption touched your heart, please show your support by giving it a thumbs up. Share it with someone who needs to hear its message. And subscribe to our channel for more life-changing stories. Make sure to click the notification bell so you'll be the first to know when we upload a new story. And remember, the greatest treasure we have in this life is the love of our family, especially from our mothers. From all of us here at Virtue Stories, we love you.